Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for coming. Thank you for giving me an hour out of your evening. And I have to tell you, I'm a little nervous because I don't talk about myself much. If you wanted a St. Mary talk, I got them. Tell me which one you want, I can fire them out. But talking about me, that's a little different. So it's only for you that I would do this. So they asked me to talk about purpose, passion, and persistence. I was given the topic like an assignment. So your purpose is your why. Why you get out of bed in the morning? Why do I get out of bed in the morning? What gets me going? My passion is my heart's deepest commitment. The fuel in my belly. In fact, if you go back to the root word, it actually comes from suffer. In 2 weeks, we will be looking at the passion of Christ. In other words, I am so committed, I am willing to suffer for this. That's commitment. But if you put purpose and passion together, you get persistence. You don't quit. And so to tell you about my sense of passion, purpose, and persistence, you need to know something about where I came from and the two foundations on which my life is built: my family and my faith. I grew up in a mining town in southwest Montana, and Butte, Montana. This is a gallows frame. And when they were mining underground, there was cages inside that took the miners down. They took the miners down and the ore up. It was pretty nasty work. My grandpa was a miner. And we call Butte the Mile High City because it sits at a mile high in elevation, and those mines go a mile deep. So the people who live in Butte are tough and gritty. It was settled by people from different ethnic groups in different parishes. So there was the Irish place, the Italian place, the Czechoslovakian place, the Chinese place. Each one of us had our own parish. Each one of us had our own neighborhoods. This was my parish. I grew up in St. Patrick's Parish, the same parish my mother was married in. This is where all of my sisters were married, and some of my nieces were married here. Now, you need to understand what I came from. Where I came from, a mixed marriage is when the Irish Catholic married the Italian Catholic. That was a mixed marriage. It's like, whoa. So my mother is a full-blood Irish. My two grandparents came from Ireland, and my dad is what we called Heinzie 57. He's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a lot of this. And he was unchurched, he was unbaptized. So we kind of broke that mold, which I'm very grateful for, because it gave my faith a balance of looking for God in everyone, not just in the church. Okay, I was cute once. You know, it didn't last long. By 2, I went downhill, but I was cute. This is my Irish grandmother. She lived with us, or we all lived with her. My dad moved into the family home because all she had was Social Security, which was not enough to live on. She came from Ireland when she was 16 as an indentured servant, which meant somebody in America, which happened to be a wealthy German family, paid for her passage. And then she had to work for them long enough to pay that off. Then she got a job in the home for the incurables because she was almost 6 foot. She's a big lady. She could light the lights at night without a ladder until she got enough money to get the train ride to Butte, where her husband was waiting for her, or actually, I say her boyfriend was waiting for her. So I learned a lot from my grandmother. She was a woman of deep faith, brooked no nonsense, and when she combed your hair out after it was washed, she started hair. It went, and you answered, yes, Grandma, no, Grandma. But when you knew her story, you knew she had suffered, and you knew that her faith had gotten her through. Because no matter how little they had, when they lived up on Bell Street and my mom didn't have an outhouse, they had an outhouse instead of plumbing, nobody came to that door, because they lived right by the mine, that they didn't get a sandwich. Nobody went away hungry, because what we did have, she shared. And she made all of our bread. I thought that we were like punished because we never got Wonder Bread, which now I realize what a gift it was to get homemade bread growing up. We were raised with some discipline. When you went to Aunt Mary's house, you sat still. That's my brother. We didn't run around, and you didn't speak unless spoken to. So we were well-behaved kids, or we would have been splattered on a wall. I don't know, but I think they got a bargain on my haircut because I didn't need one for about 6 months. Eventually, I get a little sister who joins us. This is my backyard. That's my little sister Marion. That's where we played, and that's about as big as our yard was. My dad used to call it the handkerchief yard, and we mowed it with a mower that was not electric or gas. You pushed it. But like I said, it was a handkerchief. No complaints there. That was the alley we played in behind us. This is my mom and dad who shaped my life so profoundly. And this is the cabin that I grew up in. They built that in pieces. It sits on pumice blocks. There is no foundation. It sits on pumice blocks. And my mom and dad built the first part of that by hand without electricity. And my mom was so proud of herself when she could get through the 2x4 with my dad without resting. So working hard comes naturally. You show up, you work. So from my dad was a very jolly, happy guy. He didn't have any enemies, but he did teach us that we were family, and family comes first, last, and always. As we grew up to be teenagers, we couldn't go to church with our friends. We went to church as a family. We ate breakfast together 6 days a week, and you better be there when breakfast was served. And if you slept in on Saturday, if you didn't get up in time, you had to eat mush with my grandma. But we did it together. We didn't always agree. You know, my brother and I fought all the time. But God helped the neighborhood kid if he picked on me. There was a deep sense of loyalty. We stuck together. And my dad always told us to take the high road. When people had done things to us that were insulting and you wanted to jab them, he'd say, take the high road. Take the high road. Or you really wanted to tell somebody off because they were wrong, he'd say, don't burn that bridge. Don't burn that bridge. You might need that bridge someday. So my dad didn't have enemies. He was one of the happiest, jolliest, and in that sense, I think a holy man. But he taught us, take the high road. I should have listened more often. But he also taught me that I could do anything I put my mind to, because it was my dad who taught us to drive. It was my dad who taught us to change a tire. My dad who taught me to use tools. And so my dad taught me, you can do it. You can do hard things. You can do it. Just do it again. He was a great teacher. So everybody helps. If you're little, get your red wagon. You can haul wood too. This is our cabin that sits on pumice blocks. And it's built in stages. As the family grew, you had to keep building. And so it's got some challenges. It had running water when I grew up because we had a stream up and we piped it down, but we have an outhouse. And in the last, when I entered the community, so that'd be about 1983, we got indoor plumbing. But we still have an outhouse because there's a lot of us. But that became my sanctuary. From there, we sit in the middle of what they call BLM land, Bureau of Land Management, which means it belongs to the government for grazing. I could take off and go for miles. There was my peaceful place. My dad taught me to ride a motorcycle before I could touch the ground. By this point, I could touch the ground. And did I fall off now and then? Yep. But generally I fell off because I was doing something I shouldn't do. Like jumping, racing, and demonstrating to my brother that it was possible to put the clutch in, your clutch is here, brake is here, put the clutch in with this hand and keep going. Not sure why I thought he needed to know that. But I took off and I would ride. And that was my peaceful place. That was my prayer place. My dad taught me to use a chainsaw. Because there's no reason you can't use a chainsaw. There's no reason you can't use the electrical tools. You learn to do it. We also grew up in Montana. It was winter. So I learned to drive a snowmobile. This is an antique, in case you're wondering. That is an old-fashioned Ski-Doo, and you better not get it stuck because it was really heavy to get out. And then we have more modern ones now. That one's my brother's. But we played in the snow, and it was like, well, of course you can drive a snow machine. It wasn't my mother who taught us those things. It was my dad. And he was a very patient teacher. Much more patient than I was as a teacher, I must admit. But he taught me, I can learn anything. I can do that. I can figure that out. So when the disposal goes out at home, well, there's a YouTube. You look it up, and you get a new one, and you change it. You can do that. He also taught me my love of being in the mountains and hiking, where I find God. I love to be in the mountains. I love to hike. It reminds me I am a very, very small creature in the world of the cosmos. So from my mom, I learned to think. My mother never said, how do you feel, dear? So what do you think? And why do you think that? My mother was not big on sympathy. We told her it was not in her vocabulary. She taught us all to read before we went to school. My mother did not believe in TVs, even though my father sold them. She called it a boob tube. She thought it was a waste of time and bad for your brain. So we had books in our house. We read. She also taught me to pray. When I was young, she would kneel by the side with myself and my little sister and pray with us. She would pray and help us learn how to express our prayers. She taught us to persist. My mother was persistent. Whatever it is, there was, in her mind, no reason to quit. She didn't understand quit because she grew up in that poverty on the hill. You just keep going. And I came home from school one day and a teacher had done something I thought was unfair. And my mother says, you're right, that was unfair. Learn to deal with it. You're going to have bosses who are unfair. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate the help. That was her. It's like, deal with it. Or buck up. Either one worked. She also taught me to always do my best. So if I brought home a B, she'd say, well, are you capable of an A? Is there a reason you don't have an A? I'll work on it. Now, there was 2 subjects in which I did not get in trouble for my grades. One was penmanship, because she knew I couldn't write, and the other was music, because they made us sing, and I'm tone deaf. She just said, do your best, dear. But otherwise, my mother didn't think there was an excuse for not doing your best. And so I was a scholar, and I liked school. This is me graduating from high school. This is me graduating from St. Mary. And this is my professor, Sister Marie Brakeman, who also taught me to think. I came here in biology and chemistry, and I ran into Sister Marie. Now, Sister Marie was brilliant, very spacey, but brilliant. And when I wrote something, she would write just as much, but she would say, did you think about this? Did you see this connection? What about this? It's like, oh, I didn't think of that. What about this? Now, granted, she was brilliant and lived in another realm. So when I lived with her as a sister of charity, you didn't say, Sister Marie, where are the car keys? You said, where's the car? Oh, the car. Brilliant, but spacey. So thus, I am an English teacher. So I graduated from St. Mary as an English teacher. So this has stuck in my brain. I have a couple scripture passages I'm going to share with you. This is one of those ones that scares me. And it's from the book of Revelations. So then, because you are lukewarm, you are neither cold or hot, I will vomit you from my mouth. God. Because I think, well, I'm not bad. I'm not bad. But I also know I'm not really, really good. I think, I can be, So it's like, okay, I'll try better. So that's one of those things that reminds me that if God has given me some gifts, I better use them. That one sticks with me. Not that I think God would vomit me, but the image is in my head. So I strive for excellence in all things. So as my mom passed on her gift of faith to me, it was a deep and profound faith that my mom had, but it was never showy. It was very quiet, always rational. My mother wasn't into how many angels danced on a pinhead, but she had a profound effect in my life. And she also instilled in me, which infected my theology as I learned theology, that right action is more important than right belief. Or theologically, we would say orthopraxis is more important than orthodoxy. So think about it this way. The one who goes to church on Sunday never misses and then beats his wife on Monday. No, that doesn't work. So your actions got to match what you believe. So my mother is very much, if you haven't got something nice to say, don't say anything at all. Yes, Mom. The other thing she said to us repeatedly, do you know how blessed you are? Yes, Mom. But do you know how blessed you are? Yes, Mom. She who had little had a profound sense of God's blessing. And she wanted to make sure we understood it too. So I found that knowing, loving, and serving God became my purpose. God is my North Star. Now, the problem with having knowing, loving, and serving God as your purpose, sometimes the clouds cover the star. Sometimes I'm not always sure that I'm doing what God wants me to do. Because God doesn't text, God doesn't email. So I've learned to listen. I've learned to listen to the people around me. And do I always get it right? Nope. I've made some dumb things. But that's a quest in my life that drives me, that gets me out of bed. Because I believe God called me to be here, then I need to be here with all I got. And I lived that out because after I graduated in May of 83, I came to the Sisters of Charity in August of 83. And so I have lived out knowing, loving, and serving God as a sister of charity, which is a very odd lifestyle. We are probably the only people I know who actually live a communist lifestyle. I haven't seen a check since I was 21. And I'm president, but I don't get a check. I don't own a car. I'm given a car to drive. I don't get to pick the car. They give me a car. You say, thank you. So in that way, I don't have a lot of control. I have no credit history. You know when they teach you to build your credit history? I have none. If you look me up, I don't exist because nothing is my name. Everything is in the community's name. So in that sense, if I don't own it, it's also a great freedom. When a car breaks, I drive it over and they fix it for me too. So, that's the good part of that. And every year, the sister I live with, she and I figure out a little budget that we can live by. And I have to say, I've been a very blessed life. I've never wanted for anything. If I need to fly home, I got to fly home. When my parents were dying, I got to fly home. So there isn't a sense of being scrungy or scroogey with the money. If you need something to make you whole and happy, then we're going to get it for you. We want you to be whole, healthy, and happy. If you need to go to school, they send me to school. So it's a good life. I've been at it for quite a while. I recommend it if you want to be a nun. It does have one downside. I'm not a mom. But I am a professional aunt. I have 16 nieces and nephews, and I have 36 great nieces and nephews. And everybody here knows, if a baby comes to school, they need to come bring it to me so I can have a baby fix. So this is the other one that gets me. Do you know the reading from Matthew? How do I know that you're going to be good or bad? And he says, when I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you came to visit me. That's how God's going to separate the sheep from the goats. Well, I have a real fear that I just don't want to be a goat. I want to make sure that I'm doing what God asked me to do. So how am I participating in what Jesus said? How am I feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting those in prison? How am I taking care of what we would call the corporal needs of the people around me? Because, I do not want to be a self-centered goat. That would be bad. So, as a sister at Charity, in the military, they get assignments. We called it missions. We were missioned places. So, I was missioned to Bishop Ward, and then I was missioned to Bishop Hogan, Bishop Ward, and then I went back to Bishop Hogan. Now, Bishop Hogan, when we were there, it's about 63rd and Paseo. It's on Meyer Boulevard. It was primarily an African-American school. Now, I need to tell you, how I told you a mixed marriage at home was the Irish Catholic and the Italian Catholic? There was one black woman that I knew in Butte, Mrs. Duncan. She lived 2 doors down, and she was half black and half India from India. And she was my grandma's age. So what I knew of Mrs. Duncan is that I had to go clean her walk. She was a very nice lady, and she always went to vote with 2 canes. She never missed voting. I almost caught that. So I didn't know people of different races. So going to Bishop Hogan High School, which was primarily a black school, I was exposed to a wonderful educational experience. It was funny because when I was at Bishop Ward, their first names were Tom, Susie, Patrick. Their last names all ended in Ichovich. I couldn't pronounce them. And then I went to Bishop Hogan. Their last names were Smith, black, white, but I couldn't pronounce their first names. It was Lashana and Lucretia and Bernista. Those 8 years I spent there were transformative for me. I loved teaching. I loved being with them. And it was there that these kids didn't have any money, but it was there that I developed this deep concern and commitment that if we're going to have education, it's got to be accessible to everybody. So if we're going to have Catholic education, it can't just be for rich kids. So the reason we have an angel fund is because coming to school should depend on your ability to learn, your desire to learn, and not the size of your bank account. So that's why I raise money for the angel fund. Because I think that if you have the God-given ability to learn and you want to graduate with a degree, we're going to move heaven and earth to help you. However, you will do your part. So that was profound for me. I spent 2 years in Billings, Montana. And then the community said to me, Sister Kathleen Stefani, that was the one that we named our program after, you need to go back to school. She said, I need a theologian or a philosopher. I said, fine, I'll be the theologian. So I'm a theologian. So during the summers, I got my degree at the University of Notre Dame. I came back, I taught 2 years. She said, good, you're a fine theologian, go get your doctorate. So I went back to Notre Dame and got a doctorate, 5 more to study. So there it is. That's Touchdown Jesus right there. That was where my carol was, right there. I mean, you walked in and you walked out. That was the space we had as doctoral students to study. So what did I learn studying as a theologian? The more I learned about God, the more I realized how little we know about God. And one of my favorite theologians, St. Thomas Aquinas, I like this quote. I know that God is, but I don't know what God is. Not that he went on to write 3 more volumes about God, but that sense that ultimately God is mystery and awe, and that our words fail us. So I get very nervous about people who tell me they know. And I suppose this speaks very highly to me. This is me. My heart is restless, O God, until it rests in thee, by St. Augustine. That there's this inner quest, this inner burning, this inner desire that no matter how much I learn, how far I hike up the mountain, no matter how much money I would have had, it doesn't fill that hole in me. It doesn't fill my heart. I know that ultimately what's going to fill my heart is being one with God. I've also learned along the way that if you want to know God, you have to be honest about who you are, which means the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because if you can't love yourself, you can't love God. And so I've had to learn to deal with my own things that drive everybody else nuts. You know? It's like, yeah, you're right. I do that. I'll work on that. And there are things that I have been working on now for probably 30 years, but I'm a work in progress. And so for me, God is ultimately mystery. God is love. And for me, it's best known in silence. So I need to meditate. I need to pray. I don't think God needs me to pray. I need to pray. So that's what I do every morning, is sit in my little chair and meditate, because that reconnects me with God. And it reminds me that when I see you, that I see God in you. And when I'm crabby, like I was crabby today. I was having a crabby day because I got peanut butter on my pants and a few other things going wrong. It was like, whew, stop, refocus, because you are not seeing God around you. You are seeing problems. You are not seeing the glory of God. So I went home, rode the Peloton, and I'm much better. And I washed my pants. So life is good. This is my spiritual guide. God bless this woman, she is the sister of the Holy Cross. So she lives at St. Mary, which is right across from Notre Dame. So she lives up in Notre Dame. And I met her when I was up there doing my doctoral studies. And so she helps me be honest with myself about my relationship with God and where I'm going. Do you have someone in your life with whom you can be totally honest? And then when they tell you you're off base, you believe them? Or when they tell you that you're being kind of narrow-minded, that you believe them? So she's the one who helps me, because every year I go up there for an 8-day silent retreat. So I'm silent all day. I walk, I pray, I sit, I sleep, and then 1 hour a day I get to talk to her. And it's amazing how transformative that is. It's also a little uncomfortable, because if you sit long enough, all your garbage comes up. And then you got to deal with yourself. So I'm very grateful for her. And I'm very grateful to have people that I trust in my life who will tell me the truth. You know, Dr. Metzinger's line is, why don't we sleep on that? That's when I know it's a bad idea. Then I was an assistant untenured professor. I was a happy little theologian, teaching classes. I taught the Jesus class. I taught church history. I made up a new one called The History of Salvation, which I loved. I made them read Karl Rahner, which they hated me for. I was having a great time. And the president left, and they made me president. And at the same time that was happening, that you've seen Katie Micah Lane. Katie Micah was a freshman, and I had known Katie since she was a little kid, because she was a niece of one of our sisters. And she was killed in a car wreck coming back from a dentist appointment in Lawrence. And so I'm being asked to consider this presidency, and one of my students is dead. And I had to go to the country club to meet with the board. So I went home and put on the only skirt I owned at that point. And I said, you don't know. No, I don't know this, this, and this. And furthermore, I don't know what I don't know. No, you didn't hear me. I do not know this, 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 and this. And I don't know what I don't know. And they kept. I said, okay, one of my students is dead and I need to go. So I left. That was my interview for the presidency. And I went back so we could have a prayer service for Katie. But I cried a lot about that decision, because I knew I didn't know. And I'm a really proud creature. God is still working on my pride, because I don't like to fail publicly. I knew I didn't know, but I also felt called by God to try. I thought I did have a few words with God. Like, you want me to? No. But I knew in my heart of hearts, I had to try. I did kind of curse God a little bit about that. Failing publicly is not something I do well. And so I said, yes, I'll try. And those first couple of years were a blur, because I didn't know anything. I had a really wonderful secretary named Linda, and she'd come in and she'd say, okay, you do this every year, just sign here. And then she'd say, this one, I've never seen this. You better read this one. I said, okay, I'll read that one. But I was surrounded by wonderful people, and eventually you kind of figure it out. thank God I grew up in a business family that said, okay, that your expenses and your revenues, they need to match. Got that part. So I have to say that God was right. And I've had a wonderful 25 years. And it's sad to leave, but I know it's time. I'm old and my knees are old and you need somebody with life. But I truly believe this, that education is a noble and a sacred endeavor, and the shaping of a human person created in God's image and likeness, that is a sacred task. And that's what we get to do every single day. And you may not notice it, but the change we see in you from freshman year, when you're these little discombobulated things, and then you walk across the stage and have dignity and presence, like, wow, it worked. And in the meantime, you pick up a degree. So the foundation I got from my family hasn't changed a whole lot. I still have my priorities: God, family, St. Mary, in that order. And I tell everybody who works here, those are my priorities. So when your dad is dying, you go to your dad. That's not going to happen again. Be loyal to your people. Whoever it is, you be loyal. And don't quit. Don't quit on people. Rest if you must, but don't you quit. And that my dad taught us, everybody helps. It doesn't matter how little you are or how big you are, everybody can carry wood. And that everybody deserves a chance. Everybody. And I learned I can do hard things. I can learn new things. And that it's okay to stumble as I'm learning something new. I fell off the bike a lot. And I've learned as I've grown older that I pray a lot more, I worry less, and I give a lot more to God. It's like, God's got this. I'm doing my best. You got it. And so I got to tell you one last story about my mom. We're sitting up at Georgetown Lake, which is beautiful. Now, it's July. It's a little chilly, but she's got 2 sweatshirts on and her blankie. But my mom had AFib. And so what they do for AFib is they give you blood thinners so that when it throws off little clots, you don't get a stroke. Well, my mom's intestines didn't like those, and she almost bled out and died. So they took her off the blood thinners, which means her tendency to get strokes was very high. And so we were sitting at my sister's, and she had a stroke in front of us. That is a scary event. There was nothing we could do. Because we knew we couldn't take her to the hospital because they couldn't give her blood thinners because it'd kill her. So, okay, we got through it. She lost her ability to speak. She could walk, but she couldn't speak. So I got her up to her little apartment, and I was staying with her. We got to bed. The next morning, she gets up. She still can't speak. And her frustration is palpable. I can feel it. And I didn't know what to do. And she sat down. I said, should we pray, Mom? Yes. Now, my mom had rosaries within reach at almost any place in the apartment. So I grabbed 2. And so I knelt beside her and I started the rosary. And so for the first decade, it's just me. In the second decade, she answered me. So those of you who know how to pray the rosary, the first part of the Hail Mary you say, and somebody answers the second. And I jumped. And by the time I finished that decade, she was praying the whole Hail Mary with me. We finished the rosary, and her voice was back. Now, I don't know whether that was divine intervention or because in her persistence and stubbornness, she prayed zillions and zillions of rosaries, and it was deeply embedded in her brain. But for me, either way, it was a lesson in humility, belief, and deep gratitude that her voice came back. God does take care of us. So that is my tribe. The last picture we have with my mom and dad. And so I'm very blessed that at Spire Fest, these, my siblings, you think this is a little crowd. There are now 52 of us in my tribe. And I haven't contributed. So I share this because I hum this a lot, and I'd sing it, but you really don't want me to sing it. It's a song by Keith Green. Make my life a prayer to you. I want to do what you want me to. No empty words and no white lies, no token prayers, no compromise. And I think I keep saying that to myself because I know I compromise. It's like, okay, I'll do better tomorrow, God. But I keep saying it because that's my desire. That's my hope. That's who I want to be. So my God, my purpose is my North Star. Thank you for coming. Thank you, guys.